You're live.
Hey everybody, sorry about that. We are back. This is the fourth day of the third week of the second round of Julian Assange's extraordinary rendition hearing. Today is medical examination. I will kick it back off with Assange defense, just to get us back to where we were. The prosecution calls James Blackwood to the stand. The prosecution calls Dr. Blackwood to the stand, and he is just sworn in now. He is a consultant forensic psychiatrist with the National Health Service. He made a report for the case, and prosecutor James Lewis is doing the initial cross-examining. Once again, we summarize the proceeding. We're going to be summarizing the proceedings and not provide as much exact detail out of respect for Assange's privacy. Relevant for the case, Dr. Blackwood finds that Assange may be moderately depressed and able to manage his risk of suicide. This differs from the finding of other doctors. Blackwood now has directly challenged Dr. Kopelman's assessments, referring to the fact that Assange was never taken out of the prison for medical help. If you recall, more than 60 doctors with the Doctors for Assange campaign had called to get Julian medical help outside of the prison as early as November 2019. And then there is a February 2020 statement to end his torture leading up to the other court trial. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that link into at least the A4A chat. I don't have Slow News Day chat up right this second, but I will get that pulled up here in a minute.
I've got that one out.
Okay, cool. There may be a little bit of a struggle here with latency, and I apologize about that. I have a direct line into our router, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to cut out on me. There is undoubtedly some risk of suicide attempts in the event that Assange is extradited, but that doesn't seem to rise to a high risk, Dr. Blackwood said. Dr. Blackwood continued on how Assange would be treated in U.S. prisons. We would expect that there would be a broad equivalence in Assange's mental health care treatment. This is a key point as UK doctors are expecting the U.S. prisons' mental health care to be adequate. I strongly disagree with that, considering we've gone through the special administrative measures and everything that goes along with those, including the extreme hardcore levels of social and physical isolation and legal isolation, for that matter. Dr. Blackwood said he thought that Assange was prone to self-dramatizing. That ended the prosecution's line of questioning. The defense begins cross-examining. The defense explains to Dr. Blackwood that he drew on reports from prison psychologists with whom others have said Assange had a difficult relationship with. Talking about why Assange was moved to the medical wing in Belmarsh Prison last year, the prison psychiatrist didn't properly explain to Dr. Blackwood that the move was related to suicide risk, and that the prison psychiatrist said that it was about the prison's reputational risk. So that catches us up with Assange defense. So let me hop over here to Mr. Gostola. And this is, and as always, we're getting caught up here. We let some tweet threads populate just so we weren't starting out blank. So I believe that this is the questioning. Well, so Kevin says, as of an hour ago, we can probably expect the prosecutors representing the U.S. government to adopt this line if the judge accepts the diagnosis of Assange, that some with autism shouldn't be able to commit crimes with impunity. And he's referring to the tweet above it when he says, when McCline won the fight against extradition, former White House advisor David Rivkin called it laughable. Under that logic, anybody who claims to be some kind of physical or have some kind of physical or mental problem can commit crimes with impunity and get away with it. I would just like to say that journalism is not a crime, and that there is impunity for journalists when they're acting in a journalistic way in the public interest. Kevin continues, there has been no accountability or justice for the U.S. torture or war crimes that WikiLeaks helped expose. We know that U.S. officials have actively thwarted accountability because the cable's published by Assange. Any talk of impunity from the prosecution will make this more offensive. I agree with that completely. Two witnesses for this shorter day of the proceedings. We'll have Dr. Nigel Blackwood, a medical expert for the prosecution, and Dr. Sondra Crosby, a doctor who visited Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy in January of 2018. Blackwood takes the stand in the Old Bailey. Blackwood is a prosecution witness who assessed Assange as moderately depressed and didn't think it was severe, and didn't think there was severe suicide risk factors. James Lewis, lead prosecutor, took Blackwood through entries in Assange's mental health book in Belmarsh prison from each month, April 2019 until February 2020. Each entry seen as evidence by the prosecution that he didn't have severe depression and wasn't suicidal.
That fucking bird, dude.
Dude, I know it's killing me, man. I should have brought my wrist rocket. It was pop them out of trees.
Jesus.
And that's a slingshot, just in case anyone's wondering. Assange was very wary about Blackwood's intentions. Blackwood said Assange was concerned that that Blackwood may be working for the U.S. government and CIA, who would harvest any vulnerabilities from his report. That is not unfounded. We know that through the UC Global case, that the CIA, through Sheldon Adelson and David Morales, was intimately spying on Julian Assange when he was taken to, and this was a decade ago, when he was originally taken to prison under the bail charges. It may not have been the bail charges, but it was before he went on house arrest and before all of the revelations with Cablegate and all of that. They had put metal shavings in his food when he was in prison for the first time, and it fucking destroyed his teeth. So having concerns about medical doctors in a prison that is in the UK, commonly referred to as the Guantanamo Bay of the United Kingdom, isn't an unfounded concern at all, especially considering this guy worked for the UK government. According to Blackwood, Assange believed Blackwood was entirely naive about the nature of his difficulties, and he was keen to tell him everything he knew about players involved. One of Blackwood's key obligations to Dr. Kopelman's diagnosis that Assange had severe depression is that he was never securely transported to off-site facilities for outside treatment when that was apparently standard. Kevin Gastola's thread continues. Blackwood said Assange was put in the segregated hospital unit because the video footage was leaked. It wasn't necessarily for health reasons. So we even have a National Health Service member literally say that they put Assange in segregation because of that video that came out. I don't know if you guys remember that. Back when Assange was first in prison, there was a short video that got leaked of him standing around. According to the National Health Service,
You gotta repeat that. You cut out. He was standing around, and then you cut out.
Yeah, the video where he was standing around that came out middle to end of last year, I believe, 2019. According to this NHS doctor, that's why he was moved into medical segregation, was because of that video, which I think is a little heinous. Whichever way you cut it, whether it's true or he's lying, I think that's absurd. Fitzgerald, the defense attorney, has started cross-examining by asking Blackwood about the idea that this video had led him to being moved. He showed Blackwood's report on April 12th when he was moved. The report Fitzgerald showed Blackwood said that he was very low in mood. He had thoughts of self-harm and suicide that were hard to control, so there was discussion of moving him to the healthcare department. And let's remember that the UK never allowed him to seek mental health services outside of the prison that he was actively being tortured in. And you can't treat someone for torture while continuing to torture them. So I think that is a very important distinction.
Sure, you can. They do it all the time.
Right.
That's pretty much our prison system and the UK's.
So I'm not going to read all the way back through the prosecution's cross-examining on Mary Kostakidis' threat. I'm sorry, there's a water truck driving by. So I'm just trying to get caught up here to when Fitzgerald starts questioning on Mary Kostakidis' thread. Just to give a little bit of context and paint some of the picture, because Mary Kostakidis does a great job. She says Blackwood is young and has a strong Scottish accent. His opinion has recurrent depressive. In his opinion, Assange has a recurrent depressive disorder, which he has managed apart from an episode of self-harm as a young man. He is puzzled why Professor Kopelman says that he has severe depression. If this were the case, Dr. Daly should have referred him for the appropriate care externally. They wouldn't allow that, to my knowledge. That is the normal course of action and care, contrary to what Dr. Kopelman said, that it is not available, which is just not correct. He continues to say that he is concerned about the 49-year-old, concerned that a 49-year-old is diagnosed for the first time with having Asperger's. Blackwood continues to list the characteristics and achievements that he says is inconsistent with it. He says Julian Assange has an elevated risk of suicide, but only 1 in 1,000 in prison in England and Wales carry it out. Though he worried about the extradition, and the risk is modifiable and manageable. Fitzgerald is now quoting from a prison report, which states that the staff said that they were so concerned about his risk of suicide that they had him transferred to the healthcare department. Blackwood says that he hasn't seen that report, nor did Daly mention this to him. He said she did not deny he has suicidal ideas, that it had been managed well. Blackwood reiterated that he disagrees with Kopelman about the severity of the depression. Fitzgerald, going through the specific period where Julian Assange was particularly bad, Blackwood says that Daly would have been duty-bound to refer him to appropriate care. Fitzgerald makes a point that he hasn't read all of the reports, and Blackwood agrees that there are lots of documents that he has not read. Fitzgerald asks about night checks 5 times in the night in the healthcare ward, and Blackwood says, yes, this shows how well the suicide risk was managed. Discussions of Julian Assange's medication, one in particular that Kopelman suggested for depression. Blackwood says that it was to help him sleep, as Dr. Daly indicated in her prison notes. Fitzgerald is now asking whether it would be inappropriate to keep someone who is depressed in isolation. Blackwood ultimately agrees, but says that Julian Assange is resilient and resourceful and obviously capable of engaging in this case. Fitzgerald asks if solitary exacerbates depression. Blackwood agrees, but says that it cannot be mitigated, but it can be mitigated by other factors. Blackwood says...
What fucking factors? What factors?
So it sounds like they just want to medicate him and throw him in a hole, but that's what this Dr. Blackwood here is arguing for.
You're not gonna mitigate getting depressed because you're in solitary. That's it's torture. It's fucking torture.
Right. It is. And
Jesus Christ.
Blackwood says the suicide rate in the United States prisons is lower than that of the UK's. Fitzgerald asked if he thinks keeping Julian Assange in solitary for 22 to 23 hours a day would be a good idea. Blackwood basically says it's workable depending on the context and other factors. It's not workable. You cannot keep anything without any social interaction locked in a cage for 22 to 23 hours a day. That's just insanity. That is literally torture. Fitzgerald asks about special administrative measures conditions and asks him again whether it would affect Julian. Blackwood agrees it may. Fitzgerald is reading a horrific description of conditions from a former warden of the Bureau of Prisons in the United States, and Blackwood asks and asks Blackwood, oh, sorry guys. Fitzgerald is reading a horrific description of conditions by a former warden of the Bureau of Prisons in the U.S. and asks Blackwood again, who agrees that it may affect Julian, but repeats the mantra. Fitzgerald asks why he claims there is no solitary confinement at ADC in his report. Blackwood says that it is what Mr. Kronberg said. Fitzgerald says, you just accepted that as true. Fitzgerald says, so you just accepted that as true. He asks if he thinks Maureen Bard, the warden, wouldn't know whether there is solitary or not, which then elicits the mantra about what else might be available. Nothing else, Fitzgerald says. That's it. And then, according to Mary, they are now taking a lunch break. So I'm going to click through here on Mo's thread and see where we're at with it. See if we can get a little bit more context here from that exchange between Blackwood and Fitzgerald. So I'm going to back up to Mo's to about the 10-minute mark. Well, I'll go 8-minute mark. Fitzgerald QC, defense attorney, asks if it would be inappropriate to detain someone with Mr. Assange's condition if he were to spend 22 to 23 hours a day in a cell deprived of all association with other prisoners. Dr. Blackwood says that he would have to be very careful and would need to know what arrangements have been made pre and post conviction, and certainly that there was a concern with COVID in London prisons, and that we would see an increase in suicide attempts, and that hasn't borne out. Edward Fitzgerald is now reading to Dr. Blackwood testimony from others regarding how Mr. Assange can expect to be held in extreme isolation, especially those under special administrative measures, and whether it would be psychologically damaging to Mr. Assange. This has the potential to impact Mr. Assange's mood state, but strongly insists that it is modifiable and treatable, and that the description put to him is the most something end. Sorry, guys. Words are really big. So while we are on lunch here, we're relatively caught up with some pretty good perspective from what was happening in court. And again, this is a kind of dark day. These last Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday have been pretty heavy because it all has been medical cross-examination. Court was adjourned 4 minutes ago. So let me see where everyone else is at with all this. And Richard Medhurst here giving some context on everything. So I'm going to read his last couple. And again, our good friend Richard Medhurst does not have access to the cloud video platform. He is doing the live tweet version of what we are doing here. So I'm going to pick up with the defense cross-examination because that's about 3 tweets. The defense points out that Blackwood is basing his evaluation of reports from Belmarsh Prison's psych, Dr. Daly, and is as indications that Assange was not severely depressed. Dr. Kopelman, like we had talked about, pointed out the other day that these reports were not to be considered accurate. And harkening back, that was on the 22nd. Kopelman explains that Julian's reluctance to confide in the prison staff most likely emanates from concerns that he might be on suicide watch or in a more restrictive detention. Back and forth as Blackwood asserts that he does not agree with Kopelman's diagnosis and evaluations. Blackwood concedes that detention in isolation increases depression, whilst describing Assange as resourceful and resilient, implying the patient is not a grave risk which I don't think it really matters how resilient and resourceful you are when you're placed on almost 24-hour-a-day isolation. That's just really absurd. That there would even be a medical professional that's able to argue that, or would even consider arguing that.
He's basically just saying Thorazine him up and throw him in a hole, like you said. Like, it's ridiculous.
Right. I'm not sure how he sees resourcefulness and suicidal ideations as a good combination for a political prisoner. I couldn't agree with that more. And again, this is a really heavy topic, guys. I am just reading the tweets as they're coming out. Not everybody is putting full detail and holding some information back due to privacy concerns for Julian, so I appreciate those people doing it in that way. But we are reading from Consortium News, at Assange, or at Defense Assange, Kevin Gosztola, Mary Kostakidis, Mohammed Almazi, Juan Passarelli, and Richard Medhurst. So while we are on recess here for, it may be up to an hour, I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to pull up something. I know we've talked about this before, but I think it is important to continuously point back to this because it is the thing that will ultimately more or less lift the curtain here and allow us to move forward and move out of this extradition. So this is the U.S.-UK Extradition Act of 2003, specifically reading Section 91 of Part 2. And this is about the physical and mental conditions of people set to be extradited. This section applies if at any time in the extradition hearing it appears to the judge that the condition of subsection 2 is satisfied. Subsection 2 says the condition is that the physical or mental condition of the person is such that it would be unjust or oppressive to extradite him. The judge must order the person's discharge or adjourn the extradition until it appears to him that the condition of subsection 2 is no longer satisfied. So just to make sure we all are kind of on the same page there, I believed as of yesterday, or even the day before, that this was satisfied personally. And that just has to do with the witness that showed up for the prosecution in the second half of the day, literally going through and admitting that he knows nothing about U.S. prisons, nothing about special administrative measures. So I would actually be semi-interested in seeing what Blackwood would know about these things. But when we get back, oh, sorry, coffee burps. When we get back from lunch, I believe it will be the prosecution's turn to re-cross-examine Dr. Blackwood. So we will see that once we get back. I'm just checking Consortium News's thread here really fast. Posting it in a thread. They're posting all his replies to one tweet, which makes it super impossible to follow. So let me, Steve and I had been reading through the special administrative measures and what was going on with those. It's something that we had done in the past as well as here recently. We got through most of the sections in total, at least the ones that are revelations in regards to the way that Julian would be treated over in the UK prison system. I'm going to try to see if I can't get that pulled up again just to go through a different part, but I think I'm lagging super hard. Am I still coming through okay, Josh?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay, cool. So bear with me here as I'm trying to figure all this out. So, well, I guess instead of going through the special administrative measures, because we've already touched on that 2 days this week, I want to actually take a chance here to go through the 368-page prosecution bundle that the defense witnesses are required to read before they take the stand. So let me get this set up, and I will throw up the screen share again. So this is the document in and of itself. The U.S. Department of Justice. I don't want to read through each and every bit of here, but you can see that it is William Barr that has signed this Document. And apparently we're not loading. Great. So I'm going to cut the screen share till that loads. I apologize, guys. I don't know what is taking this so long trying to get to load up.
Crappy internet.
Right. Oh. So we can use this moment as a little bit of an AMA while we are here on lunch. We may have Kevin or Mr. Almazi or someone else jump in here. But if you guys have questions about the court proceedings so far, if you have questions about Julian's situation, we have the always wonderful Nat say, whether it would be psychologically damaging or not for Julian, solitary confinement is torture. He can't be like this for years to come. His mental health is way more delicate than we thought. I remember what Obama did to Chelsea when she first got arrested, how she was tortured legally in the United States. I am sure they're going to do worse to Julian if extradited Guantanamo Bay style. Yeah, Nat, I completely agree with that. It's something that I find super disturbing and honestly disheartening. Knowing that Julian did such great work exposing these torture programs and that he now may fall victim to them. That he may be sent to the places that he exposed torture programs in, and that we all know this stuff goes on. So that's my concern. But this document's finally loaded up enough that I can read through some of it here. So let me pull my screen share back. And I'm going to pop up the Slow News Day chat here on my phone just so I can take a look through that to see if we get any questions. If you are on the MCSC network watching us, Action for Assange, the Twitter account, anything, or the Twitch account, anything like that, please ask questions if you have them. But this is, again, William Barr signed this. This certificate, Jason E. Carter, Associate Director of the Office of Internal Affairs, Criminal Division of the United States Department of Justice, United States of America, do hereby certify that the attached hereto is the original affidavit with attachments of Kelly Dreyer, Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, which was sworn before Magistrate Judge Ivan Davis of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia on June 4, 2019, and which is offered in support. Let me zoom in so everyone can read this. I'm sorry. Where was that? Which is offered in support of the request of extradition Julian Paul Assange from the United Kingdom. True copies of these documents are maintained in official files in the United States Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. And then signature. So this is the affidavit itself. And this is United States of America versus Julian Paul Assange. And this is the statement by Colleen Dwyer. And again, this is the 368-page prosecution bundle that they force the witnesses to read, or that they tell the witnesses to read, but I don't think anyone can get through 368 pages in a night unless you are a crazy person. Kelly S. Dwyer, being duly sworn and deposed, states that I am a citizen of the United States, and I make this affidavit in support of the request of the United States of America to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland for the extradition of Julian Paul Assange, who is believed to be a citizen of Australia and Ecuador. I received a Juris Doctor degree from Yale University in 2009. I am currently a member of the Bar of the District of Columbia and have been admitted in 2012. From 2009 to 2010, I served as a law clerk to Judge Kenneth Karras in the United States District Court of the Southern District of New York. From 2010 to 2011, I served as a law clerk. I don't feel like reading this whole person's background. You get it. We'll just skip down here to summary of the case. These charges are the result of an FBI investigation into conspiracy committed to commit computer hacking as well as otherwise unlawfully obtain and disclose classified information, including information that endangered the human sources by the website WikiLeaks and the founder Julian Assange. WikiLeaks is a website that solicits, publishes documents that were stolen, obtained illegally by computer hacking, disclosed in violation of law, or otherwise obtained illegally. So just to point out something here, this first section, where is it? Including information that endangered human resources. Human sources. It has already been determined in court earlier this week, it may have been on Monday actually, that is in fact not true. That the prosecution as well as the judge both were forced to agree on the timeline that says David Lee was the one that released the key to the information that allowed informants to be placed at risk, and he is the one that is culpable for that happening.
Just to make that clear, they didn't say he's culpable. you need to make that clear. That's just your opinion.
Well, that's what it sounded like from the discussion in court, that everyone agreed David Lee
repeat that last bit you cut out.
The prosecution and the judge essentially said it was not WikiLeaks that released this information first, that it was David Lee that released it when he released the passcode to the cables in his book, which opens up the door for prosecution of David Lee. The WikiLeaks website solicits and publishes documents that were stolen, obtained by illegal computer hacking, disclosed in violation of law, or otherwise obtained illegally. At least one instance, Assange has agreed to assist in a member of the U.S. Army in committing unlawful computer intrusion in order to further their schemes to steal classified information from the United States and publish them via WikiLeaks. In addition, Assange did in fact publish classified documents that were stolen from the United States via WikiLeaks, knowing that the documents were unlawfully obtained. Classified documents relating to the security, intelligence, and defense and international relationships of the United States of America, including documents containing unredacted names of people who provided intelligence to the United States and its allies. By outing these human resources, many of them Assange created
you cut out at many of them.
Many of whom lived in war zones or under repressive regimes. Assange created a grave and imminent risk that innocent people's names would suffer serious physical harm and or arbitrary detention. The disclosure of these classified documents was damaging to the work of the security and intelligence of America. It damaged the capabilities of the armed forces of the United States to carry out their other tasks and endangered the interests of the United States of America abroad. Assange knew publishing them on the internet would be so damaging. I just want to again say that already through this court case, that the judge and the prosecution both agreed that it was David Lee that released this information first by releasing the passcode to the unencrypted files, not WikiLeaks. There was a long discussion about that, and the prosecution and a judge again were forced to admit that WikiLeaks did not publish first. These charges relate to one of the largest compromises of classified information in the history of the United States. Between 2010, Chelsea Manning, an intelligence analyst serving in the United States. Hold on, there's a truck driving past. An intelligence analyst in the United States Army downloaded vast amounts of classified documents. These documents included 4 nearly complete and largely unclassified databases of nearly 90,000 Afghan war-related significant activity reports, 400,000 Iraq war-related significant activity reports, 800 Guantanamo Bay detainee assessment briefs, and 250,000 United States State Department cables. They also included the Iraq War rules of engagement files. Manning provided these records to WikiLeaks, a website founded and led by Assange. On the website, WikiLeaks expressly solicited classified information for public release. WikiLeaks publicly released many of these classified documents in 2010 and 11. Many remain on WikiLeaks' website. And again, WikiLeaks did not publish first. There was I don't know if it's referenced as hard in the third indictment that came out on June 24th, 2020. But there was a lot of talk of the most wanted leaks list, which is essentially a crowdsourced Wikipedia page or wiki page that was publicly edited by people that would like to see certain types of content or certain types of leaks released to WikiLeaks, because WikiLeaks doesn't go and get them themselves. They cultivate sources, and the sources release that information to WikiLeaks. The evidence shows that Assange agreed with Manning to attain, receive, and communicate some of the classified materials discussed above, namely the Guantanamo Bay detainee assessments, the U.S. State Department cables, and the Iraq War Rules of Engagement files. With regards to these set of classified documents, Assange also, one, encouraged and caused Manning to illegally obtain the documents so Manning could provide them to Assange. Incorrect. She did not illegally obtain them. She had full access to these documents. So factually inaccurate. Illegally obtained and received documents knowing that they had been and would have been obtained and handled contrary to law. That is not illegal. It is not illegal for someone to receive and publish classified information. I don't think it should be illegal for someone to be a whistleblower, but currently that is what the law stands as. But up until this case, it has never been illegal to receive as a publisher and publish as a publisher. And three, he encouraged and caused Manning to illegally communicate, deliver, and transmit the documents to Assange. I'm going to back out of this real quick. Well, I'll get through number 7. The evidence shows in the course of the above activities that Assange agreed with Manning in March 2010 to crack a password hash stored in the United States Department of Defense computers connected with the secret Internet Protocol Network, the United States government network used for classified documents and communications. At the time, Assange agreed with Manning to crack the password hash. Manning had already provided WikiLeaks with hundreds of thousands of downloaded classified documents, including the Afghan war-related significant activity reports and the Iraq war-related significant activity reports.
All right, back out of here. Kevin's on. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, just like drop by and say hello for a little bit.
Awesome.
Yeah, how are you today? How's it going?
Pretty good.
So,
I appreciated the extra sleep this morning.
Oh, right. Steve's still sleeping, I think.
Yeah, he didn't wake up.
Yeah, I mean, he literally, when we get done with these streams, he goes and does construction for like 8 to 12 hours.
Yeah.
And then comes back to do another stream. So I'll let him sleep. I won't hold it against him this time. But you've been doing a great job following the court case. I was reading through actually the witness bundle. I'm not going to be able to get through all 368 pages. But could you give us a little bit of an update of what we've seen so far in court today?
Yeah. So, I some people who follow me regularly might see sometimes that there aren't live updates at a given moment. I was trying to get down as much of the report that was read into the record by James Lewis because the fact is that if after he's done, that's the last chance we're going to have it. These reports on Julian Assange's mental health for reasons of privacy are apparently being objected to being released. The defense and prosecution both agree that they should remain in the court record, but not available to the press. So, once we hear it, it's gone. And so I was trying to get as much of it down. And then I went back and did some updates. But it was just something for people to know that but right now we have this, it's not really that big of a deal, but we have a disagreement between the court and both of the prosecution and the defense. And then the press are arguing over how much of this mental health material should be made public. And a lot of it is really sensitive. And as Stella Morris has said, it's, the U.S. government has now stripped us of the last remaining parts of our privacy that we had left. As everything in Julian Assange's medical record is basically being hung out for us all to see during this proceeding. So, and you know, it keeps coming up in these proceedings that when he talks to these doctors, that he's afraid that this is all going to be passed back to the CIA and used against him. I'm very sensitive to that, and I've been keeping that in mind. And anytime that comes out, I tweet it, because, you know, what we're going to hear later this afternoon from Sandra Crosby, when she visited him in the embassy in 2018, that pressure campaign was really intense. And I think she was there when UC Global was still had the contract. I think that's January 2018. So that would have been fresh. It would have been pretty much, they would have had it. And after December 2017, after he tried to get the diplomatic passport and leave the embassy, there was this plan that they considered for the Christmas of 2017 to leave the embassy. You know, after that, the arrest warrant was issued for Assange by the U.S. government. So anyways, we had this doctor that's been on the stand in the morning. His name's Nigel Blackwood. He's a prosecution witness, and he's talking basically about how he disagrees with the defense's doctors who have the doctors that the defense called disagrees that Julian Assange had severe depression, disagrees that he is someone with Asperger's syndrome. And, you know, everything he says is much more mellow and subdued. And he basically says that Julian hasn't had the kind of severe issues that the defense has claimed. And the most important, I think the most interesting thing is the discrepancy that that Fitzgerald, the defense attorney, was able to show when he first started his cross-examination. So on April, I wanted to get my date correct, on April 18th in 2019, this was about a week after Julian Assange was arrested, he was put in the hospital unit in Belmarsh. And apparently this doctor believed that it was because video footage leaked of Julian Assange showing him in the prison. He's even used the words reputational damage, which just reminds me of what it's like in U.S. prisons here. I've covered a lot of U.S. prison matters, and, you know, anything like that, you know, they're very sensitive to the damage to their reputation, and they will retaliate against people when this happens. So it almost seems like he's admitting that they retaliated against Assange and put him in the hospital unit in segregation there because video was available to the media. But that's actually not true. So Fitzgerald nailed him down and showed him a medical report, and they actually were documenting that he was low in his mood. He was having thoughts of self-harm and suicide. And they discussed with him about going to a healthcare department, and he wanted to be moved into that, even though later on he didn't like it there. He thought, you know, that might be good for him to be moved to that department initially, if you agree with what's in this report. And so it's I'm not sure what is going on here, but it seems like someone was, I mean, if I had to guess, this would be my theory. I can't prove this, but I think that the U.S. government wouldn't want their extradition case to be impacted by Julian Assange being put in a hospital unit for depression, severe depression, or suicidal thoughts, because that's the kind of thing that is going to help him defeat being extradited to the United States.
Do you think Dr. Blackwood's implication of that situation, calling it to basically saying that it was to save the image of Her Majesty's prisons as opposed to the health of Julian, do you think that could have any larger legal implications into the case if that is found to be accurate, that forcing someone into medical isolation as a PR stunt, essentially? Do you think that would be more damaging to the case than for Suicide Watch, so to speak?
Yeah, I don't know if I would go that far. I understand what you're saying, and that seems kind of logical. But to me, the more important thing is that they seem to be coming up with an alternative reason for him being put in the health ward, so that it's not in the record that he's moved because he's having this psychological breakdown. And this would have been a week after he was brought to the prison. And also, well, at that time, he doesn't know that he has the 17 additional charges for the under the Espionage Act. So if you look at what we're seeing in the record, it's interesting because, or perhaps really disturbing because if you match it up with, okay, so if you go to May 24th, I believe this is after we get the 17 charges under the Espionage Act, and the nature of the prosecution against him becomes much more different. It's no longer just about the accusation of helping Chelsea Manning to be anonymous in the U.S. military computers. It's you publish classified information. It's much more political. It's more harsh. It's much more intense. And we have on May 24th that they document he's preoccupied with his case. He's eating and sleeping poorly. He's fearful. He has a low mood. He's not really suicidal, but this is when the decline really accelerates. And it starts to be, so in that first month, I think he probably thought one charge, extradition, we can manage this. We can take on this case. But then it got much more brutal.
Absolutely, especially considering the gross volume of documentation that was getting entered in with those additional charges placed there, and Julian having no access to what those documents were. So I think that that's definitely one of those things that piled on there, considering that he couldn't see any of the evidence being levied against him. We know that he didn't get much legal paperwork. And even during the first round back in February of his extradition proceedings, it was reported that he was having his legal papers taken from him at the end of every day, too.
Dude, that bird.
I know, man. This is one rowdy dude day.
I'll note it's kind of a more general comment, but I note that I find it pretty disturbing. I've now said that word twice. A lot of this is disturbing, but I find it disturbing that the doctor for the prosecution is basically rationalizing and justifying solitary confinement in U.S. prisons while he's on the stand. It really looks like we can point to a pretty considerable decline in the UK. I don't study what's going on in prisons in the UK, but it sure sounds like y'all might have a problem if you're there in London, if you're British or whatever, because he seems to think that isolation is acceptable for a number of people, even though it's widely accepted that that is cruel and inhuman treatment under, by human rights people who have studied all of this and studied the impact. And as globally, where you've been moving away, if you go back to 2012, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Juan Mendez, was making a pretty global push, advocating for Chelsea Manning, and then also advocating for prisoners around the world against being held in solitary. And yet this guy is suggesting that, hey, we can manage some people in isolation. You can put somebody with depression in isolation and manage them. There's other ways. So if you put them in there, you can modify their risk of suicide and still keep them in solitary confinement. So I found that a pretty obnoxious.
Yeah, I found, one of the things yesterday that I found particularly disturbing was all of the amenities.
You're right.
That were.
They get a soccer ball, Andrew.
Yeah,
that's game changing.
Detention center, that wonderful hospitality-giving human detention facility. Could you talk about that a little bit and the absurdity of what James Lewis was trying to argue in court?
Well, and then I can't remember it off the top of my head. Before this case is over, I'm going to try to put to memory. I guess I got to put to memory what all the claims are of Kromberg about what you get if you go to a Supermax. What kind of hotel accommodations you get in the H block unit, where you'll sink into the deeper depths of hell while you're in the Supermax. But I note that Feazell who was the doctor that was the first prosecution medical expert to take the stand, he essentially undermined the entire basis for asking this question in court, because he said, you can read all of this stuff from the Bureau of Prisons, but I want to know, how are they implemented? And what's the quality of any of these things that you've just listed to me? And I thought that was an important moment, because it contradicted what the prosecutor was trying to get out of him. And he's the prosecution's witness. He wasn't there from the defense. The defense didn't put him on the list and call him. They have their other doctors. And yet he was saying that you can't take Gordon Kromberg at what he's saying in any of these documents. He's the assistant U.S. attorney, and they say that the Bureau of Prisons do all of these things to protect prisoners, but that's not how it works in these facilities, because you talk to people who are defense attorneys, or you talk to prisoners who have been there, or you talk to people who are observers who write reports about abuses, and that's not how it works. I mean, like you say, so what if you get the soccer ball? You're gonna, what else is happening there that makes it so that people are deteriorating? We've had former wardens from the Supermax in Colorado describe it as hell.
I have the tweet here by Mary Costakidas just to read from yesterday. This this was 22 hours ago. I'm going to read through both of them just to give the full context. Lewis, re-examining, makes an assumption that pretrial Julian Assange would not be held under special administrative measures, which we know they can hold people pretrial under special administrative measures. Fitzgerald objects, saying that he would be kept under Sampson pretrial. Lewis, quoting from cases from previous prisoners held under special administrative measures.
Repeat that. You're cutting out. You cut out. Repeat it.
Sorry. Lewis, quoting from other cases where prisoners held under special administrative measures had been meeting with their lawyers, and one even put out press releases saying that they have televisions, indoor and outdoor recreation, soccer balls, aerobatic exercises, movies, arts and crafts, bingo. All of this was all read from Kromberg's declaration. Kromberg was not present for cross-examining. And Lewis continues reading, describing the Alexandria prison as a holiday resort, essentially.
Well, shit, they got bingo. I mean, that's all you gotta have, man. Jesus Christ.
I do remember the bingo.
Bingo? Like, really? We live in a cartoon. I'm saying that on Steve's behalf.
But, then we have come up that this doctor who's on the stand right now agrees with the assistant U.S. attorney, Gordon Kromberg, that there's no solitary confinement at Alexandria jail where Chelsea Manning was held, even though we know that could not possibly be true. Paul Manafort was just held there in solitary confinement. He was kept in conditions that were pretty harsh. And also we have Maria Butina's case. And there's a great article out there. People can go find this at the New Republic. It's The Spy Who Wasn't. It was written by James Bamford, who is an excellent journalist. Actually, has come up in this case because he was targeted for prosecution or threatened with it back in the 1980s by the U.S. government. He's done amazing work on the NSA. And so, anyways, he describes here what solitary was like for Maria, who has since been deported back to Russia. But she says it's a 7 by 10 foot room, a steel door, cement bed, 2 narrow windows, each 3 inches wide. She got to go outside for 45 minutes. Essentially she was put in this condition to pressure her and coerce her into pleading guilty to her crime. So you get put in this, I mean, there's more as this is described. There's no food slot, so she's they keep talking about how there's openings for communication, and so it's not as bad as these human rights advocates say. She didn't get much. They didn't give her much reason for why they were putting her in these conditions, so they just put her there. So Julian Assange could be put in these conditions, and they may not really have to give him much of a basis. Although we would know. I mean, the defense has painted a pretty good picture of why the U.S. government would do this to him.
And we know too, just by reviewing the documents, that when you're in special administrative measures, you can't just appeal the fact that you have SAMs put on you. That there's usually a 6 to 12 month window before you can even request to be moved out of that situation.
Well, what it is called the administrative remedies process. It's a completely bogus, and it's entirely phony. There's no way that anyone who goes through it is going to convince anyone in that prison that they're being abused. Most of the time, it's just to tie you up and make it impossible for you to go to court. It delays and delays and delays everything. And, by the time a year has unfolded, you might be so frustrated that you just abandon it, or it might have been so long ago that you're willing to move on. I mean, it depends on how severe what you're talking about, but you can't go to a court until a year later. So you've gone through a year of torture and or abuse, and then finally you get to go before a judge, and then that takes another year or 2 years.
Mm-hmm. And it's even, to me, the most particular disturbing part is the fact that you have basically a live FBI agent sitting in the room with you as you're discussing your case with your attorneys in special administrative measures, and that FBI agent at any moment has the right to say, "Okay, you're done. Stop talking," and end that conversation immediately. If they even just suspect or feel that unnecessary information about the case is being given. You've done a lot of reporting on whistleblowers and things along those lines of people placed in SAMs. Do you know of any examples, or have you personally seen or reported on any cases where that's happened?
No, actually, Julian's case would be the first with SAMs, although I will say that what Chelsea went through at Quantico with when she was in pretrial waiting for her, when she was at the Marine Brig and they put her on suicide risk, I'm betting that we could probably expect similar treatment for Julian Assange, given how much the defense has emphasized the suicide risk. My guess is, this is the way the U.S. government is with its cruelty. So, the things that they do to you, they try to make it seem like it's for your own good, that they're trying to help you. And if the defense is insisting in this extradition that Julian Assange is at great risk of suicide and will be when he gets to the United States, but they managed to bring him to the U.S. and put him on trial, we now have a scenario where they have to decide whether to agree that all of this is true or to deny it. And my guess is that we could see that prison authorities are abusing Julian Assange and keeping him in really harsh conditions to prevent suicide, and saying, well, the defense said he would be suicidal, and we have to make sure he lives and gets to trial. And then obviously all of us would say, but this is why this is why extradition should have been opposed. This is why you shouldn't have allowed him to be, hey, Steve, you shouldn't have been allowed to.
Morning.
Welcome.
Thanks,
gonna give you-
Kevin. Great to be here today.
I'm gonna give you lots of shit later. Poor Steve.
I'm going to hop off camera for a second. I have to run to the bathroom. I'll be right back.
Well, I don't work a construction job, so I couldn't do both. So I have to give you big ups because I don't know how I would do streaming and writing and then also go do construction.
It's pretty hectic, man. Well, and the others, like, I've got a ton of other shit going on, like,
yeah. And then you have life. Then you have life. Yeah, and then you turn around.
I made it to bed at like just shy of midnight, and I remember about the fifth time the alarm went off, going, no, But I don't remember automatically shutting it off the first 4 times. I don't. Fucking snapped to about, I don't know, 20 minutes ago. Like, oh fuck.
We
Yeah.
we figured you probably needed a little bit of sleep.
Well, I did, and that should probably do it for the rest of the week. And now that I have coffee, everything is okay.
Well, I was
apologize for my tardiness, and it will not happen again.
I was pretty sure that this trial was going to give me insomnia because it's forced me to change my sleep schedule to the point where it's like my body is kind of like, oh, not go to sleep yet. No, this is too early. Just like, so I feel you. It's this is something, and yet I'm not pissed off at the defense. I think if they want to keep going on with this case, they can do so. Vanessa Baretzer.
That's a fair point. Like it, with everything that the defense has had to endure in terms of, you know, judicial and legal tricks that both the DOJ and the prosecution have tried to play, like I understand exactly where they're coming from. And I know that they're also doing it from a place where concern for Julian's health is at the forefront. So give them whatever time they need. Give them a month to prepare a final argument. I don't care. I don't like.
Yeah.
Fucking I'll muddle through all of this the best I possibly can, and probably wind up being about 2 hours late another time in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. Well, so I was just saying that I think, you know, in something out of like George Orwell, that it's entirely possible that we're going to see Julian Assange, if he is brought to the United States, that in pretrial confinement, similar to what happened with Chelsea Manning, that they would be claiming it's for his own good that they're putting him in suicide watch. And then, you know, we'd be saying, you didn't say this was real. You didn't believe that he was at risk of suicide when he was on trial and challenging his extradition. But now you're agreeing that he's at risk. And so that would be the new phase of this, that they would be claiming that they had compassion and cared.
That tracks. That's pretty on I don't know, on brand for the State Department and the way that they've handled all of this. I've had a number of really good, I think, conversations with Danny Sherson about whether this is Orwellian or Huxleyan or a little column A and a little column B, and we've kind of settled on this sort of like macabre blend of Huxley and Orwell, mostly because for the people who are actually going through all of this shit, we're fully aware that it's happening to us, and that makes it seem a little bit more Orwellian, because we're already cognizant of, you know, the censorship and all of the abuses of civil rights and liberties. Most of the broader public, however, it has been successfully kept out of the dark, or kept in the dark for not just what's happening to Julian Assange, but what's happening to all of us in terms of attacks on journalism, in terms of an escalation of censorship, and escalation of both surveillance and surveillance capitalism, and that makes it much more Huxleyan, because there's no cognizant awareness of just how horrific things have become. It's generally an interesting subject to kind of explore in a little bit more detail. I don't know how much time you have right now, but certainly down the road we should try to pick that bit back up. I've been awake for 20 minutes. I just want to make that perfectly clear.
Hey,
I sound like a
it's
fucking
fine.
blabbering idiot. That's gonna be why.
No, that was I was going to say that Chris Hedges has a great column from 2011 where he looked at Orwell and Huxley, and he said, you know, it's basically both, that, you know, they both predicted the future, and he pointed out what he thought was each of it. It's called A Brave New Dystopia. A Brave New Dystopia. It's at Truthdig.
I think I'm a little bit more cynical. I haven't read either book. I don't know the context of most of it, but just the way Steve describes it, like I get the premise, but I think the general public is aware, not of Julian's case, but of the mass surveillance against them and of the total totalitarianism of the state. Because even when you're out here like us in the streets talking to people about Julian's situation, there's no one that's surprised. There's like no one that you're like, hey, he's been in 23 to 24 hours a day solitary confinement for the last 500 plus days. And they're like, oh, like, I didn't know that was happening to him, but I'm not shocked that that's what the U.S. government is doing. So I think that that's a lot darker. The fact that not only are they keeping it hidden, but then once people realize it, they're not surprised, they're not outraged, because these detrimental processes are something that has been laid out across the whole of society. And it's just Julian's case that is highlighting it for a lot of people.
Somebody was in I'm just now like starting to check out Twitter and go through my own notifications from the last day and a half and shit like that. But there are there are people that are still surprised that there aren't like that this particular trial isn't receiving the attention of, say, like an O.J. Simpson trial or even like the Menendez brothers or shit like that, because in the United States, like, a big court trial is a public spectacle, and it's something that regular, like, I remember when the O.J. Simpson thing happened, you couldn't walk 10 feet without running into somebody with an opinion on it, and it was because it was so sensationalized, and I don't know if it was we were still trying to like work as hard as government does now to divide the country. Like, I don't remember that feeling, but I was also much younger. But I do remember not being able to talk to anyone who was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I haven't seen a word about that trial. Because of the secretive nature of this case, and because of the even more secretive nature of the Eastern District of Virginia, like, that opportunity to engage with people about what's happening in the day-to-day of court has been largely taken away from us. And I think that not only is that on purpose, but it's on purpose to the detriment of the public in general, at least the public of the countries that are affected the most by this case, which in my opinion would be the Five Eyes countries. And also the multitude of countries that have been assisted by WikiLeaks in their releases that have to deal with, how diplomats act and treat other people, and the war logs, obviously, Syria files, like most of the places we bomb, I guess, is where I'm getting at.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to run, but just as a closing thought before we head back into court. I would say that if you notice, the times that this case has made mainstream coverage, or the times that it has gotten a lot of attention, are actually, I think, this week now with the medical evidence that we're hearing, and then the outburst, as they described it, from Julian Assange in that first week. And, it's the thing of, the press really believes that they can feed the masses this narrative of this freak of this guy who is psychotically breaking down, and I'm sure that they might go so far to say he brought this on himself. If he had just gone and faced justice, most of them would say if he had just gone and faced justice in Sweden for. And I'm going to use their words. I understand that this is not what WikiLeaks and Julian Assange would say, but they would say if he had just gone, faced up the rape allegations this would all be over by now, and he wouldn't have had to give away 7 to 6 years of his life. That's the crude nature of most of the editorial boards of these media organizations. That's how they act, even though they're aware of the threat to press freedom with this prosecution. So I would just say that while I want to win, while I wish we could win on the principle that WikiLeaks exposed war crimes and torture, and that they don't deserve this, and that a court should reject the extradition because that kind of criminality was exposed. Unfortunately, the freak show aspect probably is going to go a longer way to saving Julian Assange's life. That's just how degraded our institutions are globally, not just in the US, but you can see it in Britain as well. And so that's why in the last day or two, I've been connecting the dots, writing about Gary McKinnon and Lori Love's case, and the Asperger's syndrome aspect, and the fact that they both were saved because they had that diagnosis. And, I think if there's any reason to be hopeful this week, it's the fact that we're getting it into the record that he's been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, and that could persuade an appeal court later. I don't know about this judge. I mean, I don't have much faith, but I think
I think that's a pretty shared opinion.
And I'm not dissenting at all with that. But that a higher court would, because it was actually the UK Home Secretary that was the final word that rejected Gary McKinnon and his extradition. And he's the hacker. He was accused of this massive military hack of military computers. So, anyways, I've got to bounce and go get ready for whatever they're going to do. As we got a couple more doctors, and I'll talk to you all later.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you,
Kevin.
So
To
one of
kind
the-
of piggyback off of that real quick, though, I can't help but notice that the mainstream media picked up on the quote-unquote outburst from Julian Assange during the first week of the hearing, but have had fuck all to say about the second time that Julian interrupted proceedings, in which he said, "Madam, you will not censor a torture victim." Nobody reported on that.
Mhm.
They reported when he said one word, and that word was nonsense, but they did not report the full sentence a week later that had to do with silencing a torture victim.
Well, part of the travesty, to pick up where Kevin was talking about how the mainstream media is covering it, there are a lot of independent outlets. Kevin has a list on his website. I'll put that into chat of people that are doing a great job in the independent media covering it. But there's still like just an utter lack of, I don't want to call it interest, but of coverage of the day-to-day happenings. You have Consortium News, you have Kevin doing great work, you have Craig Murray doing amazing work. But that doesn't translate to the broader American public generally, because those, for the most part, short of Shadowproof, aren't really American outlets. So I'm like Ron Placone has been doing great work with Graham Elwood and talking about Julian's case almost daily. But there's still Jordan Sheridan has also been doing a lot of great work. But there's still this massive disconnect between the American independent media and the coverage of this court case. And so I would like to encourage anyone in the independent media. Combo Couch is doing a great job. MCSC is allowing us to broadcast on here. But there's very little coverage from major platforms on what is happening day to day for Julian. And I think that is ultimately how you pressure the mainstream media into covering it, is to have it be the wildfires in the independent media, essentially, to where there's so many things getting so much more coverage. While they are important, they're not a threat to global press freedom. This for so long that I feel like this should be getting like wall-to-wall 24/7 coverage, but it just isn't.
Well, it's a little bit more frustrating when you remember how just absolutely fucking batshit bug fuck nuts the U.S. public goes over a court hearing, over a trial.
Yeah.
Like the since O.J. Simpson, like anytime anyone who's even moderately famous goes to court and there's an extended period of like testimony and witness interviews, that shit is just usually sun up to sundown and all points in between, broadcasted on every single network. Every fucking morning radio show is talking about it. It's everywhere. You can't escape it. And
particularly here in the US, if you have a morning radio show, this is happening in the morning live and could be covered with enough breaks to still fill in. Like right now, we're on an hour lunch break after we did an hour of coverage, where we could be talking about, if we were someone that had a radio show at this time, anything. So I don't know, but I do just want to, before we get too far into the weeds on that, because it is frustrating, I did just want to get back here to some of the threads so we can get those going again. And this is a particularly heavy day, guys. I know I've said that a couple times. But we will at 2:05. So as of 2 minutes ago, I believe we are back into court. We have Mo posting that Joseph Farrell, Christian Hrompson, Stella Morris, and Craig Murray are outside of the Old Bailey during the lunch break. And you can see them standing around chit-chatting. I would be interested in knowing the conditions inside of the court, because yesterday we had Vanessa Baratzer for literally no reason, it seemed like it was really strange. All of a sudden, after 3 weeks, say we need to enforce social distancing rules in this courtroom, and kicked people out, particularly Christian Hrompson, who is the current editor-in-chief of WikiLeaks. So I would just kind of like to know the state of the internals of the room right now, and if they are allowing everyone to access it, or if the court is being extremely draconian again for no particular reason. So I think that that's a distinction that we can hopefully see here soon. But I want to show this picture just because I think it's beautiful. So let me throw my screen share up here real quick. So you can see everyone standing outside here talking. You got Christian, Stella, Craig. But I just wanted to point out all of the yellow ribbons tied around the security fences. I think that is a great thing for the yellow ribbons for Assange. And then we have another picture from this way showing the protests outside. Yeah, stop share. So let's see, as these threads populate, what we have going on. We have not had anything new come in from most people yet, aside from those pictures from Mo.
Sorry, there's just a
yeah. So
funny little exchange in my chat just now.
I do find it interesting that you have the Kronberg, who.
Oh Lord!
What?
I just saw the chat. Damn it, Steve! I don't want it. I don't need that mental image at fucking 6 a.m, bro.
Sorry to bother you.
Sorry, Andrew. Keep going.
So that joke was that just now. That's funny on like 3 different levels, and I hope that somebody who has seen that movie will put it all together and appreciate it. Anywho,
good.
Where were you headed, Andre? Before I completely derailed this,
I was just gonna talk about this tweet from Richard Medhurst. Blackwood says that he was led to believe that the Assistant U.S. Attorney Kronberg said that the prisoners are not held in administrative segregation in Alexandria, Virginia's detention center. Expert witnesses essentially admit that he took the prosecutor's word that there will be no solitary. And then he posts this, which is an article about Chelsea Manning's situation from a year ago, where it says, and I'm sorry, not a year ago, but March 24th, 2019. Chelsea Manning, where supporters demanded she get released from solitary confinement. Chelsea Manning was held in 22 hours a day, solitary confinement after being jailed for refusing to testify in a grand jury investigation against WikiLeaks. So that entire witness document essentially can just be picked apart as just blatant lies. We know that the Alexandria Detention Center has solitary confinement because when Chelsea was placed in there the second time after the 18-month release after her sentence was commuted, she was held in solitary confinement for, I want to say, almost 30 days or slightly over 30 days. I can't remember the exact number, but it's somewhere in that range. So this is heinously wrong. Blackwood should know better because there is administrative segregation in the Alexandria Detention Center in ADX and MCC.
Yeah, the thing that they were trying to do was play cute and be like, well, there's no solitary because they use the banal phrase administrative segregation. So they're two completely different issues, and I don't want you to conflate them when the reality is, yes, it's solitary. Yes, it's a punishment. Yes, they do have it. Yes, Chelsea Manning was subjected to it. I believe Jeremy Hammond was as well.
Yeah, I believe so. He was as well, too. And just to finish up that thread here by Richard Medhurst, he says, remember, Manning was held in Alexandria, Virginia, and Assange certainly to be held there in pretrial. Even before having been convicted of a crime, he will be placed under inhumane conditions before the hell in ADX Florence. Alarm bells should be going off for every journalist. I hope they are, because we had on Friday the U.S. prosecution literally admit that even going as far as retweeting information about classified information is punishable under the Espionage Act, which means any person that's ever transmitted, shared, sent, myself included, classified information through social media can be just as guilty or is just as guilty as WikiLeaks and Julian for posting it. So I just find that I always try to harken back to that because they're literally saying that they're going to just round people up because of social media posts, which is something that we're seeing happen in Australia already.
I'm trying to do three things at once here real quick.
I'm looking through the threads to see where we're at. Juan Passarelli has come in with a couple new tweets in the last 3 minutes here. Fitzgerald says, you were not addressing the question as to whether it would be humane for Assange's conditions in U.S. prisons. Blackwood said, no, only risk of suicide. Fitzgerald says, you haven't visited any U.S. federal detention penitentiaries. And Blackwood says, no. Fitzgerald says, when you wrote your report, you only based it on what Kromberg had said. Blackwood said, well, yes, and some literature available in U.S. prisons. So you have this prosecution defense literally admitting that he doesn't know anything about U.S. court systems outside of that bullshit document that we were reading at the beginning of the lunch break, which we will read into more too. Fitzgerald continues to ask, before you made your report, you hadn't read the defense medical reports? Blackwood says no. So before Blackwood had even written up what he was going to say, he hadn't even viewed the defense material, in his own words. Mary Kostakidis back in as of 3 minutes ago, going over the same thing, but I will read it out just because. Fitzgerald continues cross-examining Blackwood. He asks him whether it would be inhumane to expose someone in Julian Assange's condition to the conditions in the prisons that he would be held in. Blackwood says, that's not for me to say, it's for the court to decide. Fitzgerald points out that the reports were available to him about the conditions in in the U.S. prisons Julian would be held in before he wrote his report, rather than just reading from what the prosecution said. So again, Blackwood here admitting that he didn't do his research in regards to this. Mary continues, agrees, but this is Blackwood's words here. Blackwood agrees, but that he said he had read academic articles that say the conditions in the U.S. and the UK prisons are similar. We've reviewed SAMS over the last 2 days. I don't know if we'll get too much into it today because we have talked about it a lot previously. The conditions that Julian's being held in the United Kingdom are arguably worse than what special administrative measures would be due to the coronavirus lockdown. And we don't know how the coronavirus lockdown in the U.S. would even affect special administrative measures. But to the point that when trial kicked off on September 7th, Julian hadn't met with his attorneys in over 6 months. So I just think, sorry, there's a mosquito like chasing me down. So I just think that that's a particularly disturbing thing, that Julian literally had to go 6 months before he got any legal representation, which I don't know how the UK can justify continually going forward with this, aside from the fact that they're just a totalitarian state.
So just a few minutes ago, after Kevin got left the stream and went back to covering this trial, he's put up a couple of screenshots from James Bamford's report, The Spy Who Wasn't, about Maria Butina, the not a spy that the U.S. government arrested for having her picture taken with Mitch McConnell. Apparently, that was enough to throw her into the Alexandria Detention Center. And in this article, there are at least 3 occasions where the author talks about her being put in solitary confinement in the Alexandria Detention Center. So we've got more reporting on the fact that ADC does have solitary confinement, and that this Blackwood seemingly went to great effort to not include any reporting articles or scholarly publications that included the phrase solitary confinement when discussing ADC. It's an exercise in obfuscation on the part of Blackwood to only uncritically, unquestioningly rely on a report from fucking the Assistant Attorney General Kronberg, who, again, this report keeps getting cited throughout this case. It's not a scholarly text. It's not a reviewed publication. It's not even an official, like, this is what the standard for extradition in prisons are. What it is it's a fantasy. It is a construct of fiction that is supposed to take the reader on an adventure that allows them to be comfortable enough to the, I guess, ensuing and ongoing and continued torture of Julian Assange. That's what it is. Like, there's no factual basis in the reporting. They're all assertions. It's all innuendo. It's all suggestive. So why they're allowed to continue to quote from this like it holds any measure of truth is fucking beyond me.
And you can even see, so we read through probably like the first 3 pages, and even in there, the factual inaccuracies were terrible, to the point that the first affidavit of a person in there, they didn't even read the timeline. They didn't even know the timeline of release that the court has now agreed upon. So I don't see how this document can still continue to stand, especially considering the very first affidavit, again, is someone who says WikiLeaks published first, and WikiLeaks released the name of informants, when that's factually inaccurate. We know that it was David Lee's book that revealed the key that was the one that exposed the informants. So I think that that's always important to harken back to. Is this document
Yeah,
doesn't
that's
follow
a great
reality.
point. A couple of the main assertions in Kronberg's report have been refuted multiple times in the last 2 weeks. Like if I was the legal team, I would ask for an updated report. If I was the judge, I would ask for an amended report. If I was the prosecution, I'd be like, why the fuck did you put this in here? You made me look like a dumbass. You know, like I would be angry at this individual, no matter which side of the courtroom I happen to be sitting or standing in.
Well, the only person Lewis is allowed to yell at are the judge and witnesses. He's not allowed to turn around and yell at other members of the United States prosecution or
You know that Daddy Coke Nose yells at fucking everybody. You know that.
So do we want to read the stuff from The Spy Who Wasn't?
Meh. I mean, we can do that. It's a couple of sentences about solitary confinement.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So Kevin has another tweet out here, says, returned from Luntz, Fitzgerald confronts Blackwood's denial of reality of solitary confinement in U.S. prisons and his reliance on Kronberg's submission for the prosecution that there is no solitary confinement in the Alexandria jail. So that was our last update from Kevin. Mary Kostakidis continues here saying, Fitzgerald's asking him to compare what has been available to Julian Assange here, phone calls to the Samaritans, for example. We found out yesterday the Samaritans is a UK group for people in prison that need mental health help. I believe that is what that was.
I don't know if it's just for people in prison. I think that's their equivalent to our
general,
suicide type organization type of deal.
And what Maureen Barrett says the conditions in the U.S. would be, does he consider them the same? Blackwood says something nonsensical in reply. He says that it depends on other factors at the time. Fitzgerald pushes him, and he finally says, in those conditions, in those conditions, with no outlet for his intelligence, etc., it would be a deletionary effect. Deleterious effect.
You're muted, Steve.
Deleterious.
Man, these are some big words. I knew it. We talked about it yesterday, that the prosecution and prosecution witnesses are going to start using bigger and bigger words just to throw me off.
They're like, we know that there's
like fuck Andrew. That's their fuck you switch to Andrew,
who's doing live coverage of this. All right, everybody, polish off your $3 words.
Yep,
we go get this bastard.
So as of 6 minutes ago, Juan Passarelli posted, Fitzgerald says, you didn't look at what he would be subject to in ADX Florence. Blackwood says no, that he relied on what Mr. Assange had told me. Fitzgerald says if Assange is to be extradited, he would be subject to the same treatment that other prisoners are subjected to under special administrative measures. That would be psychologically detrimental to. Would that be psychologically detrimental to Mr. Assange? Blackwood says yes, I believe that is true. So at least Fitzgerald here is able to get the prosecution's witness to admit that yes, Sam's is a terribly debilitating condition. Blackwood continued that Assange had around 25% weight loss. That could be an indication of depression. If you lose 25% of your body weight,
Jesus Christ.
Like,
I've done that before. Like that shit's like crazy. Like that means like bad stuff's going on. Period. That doesn't just fucking happen. Like, cause you're not eating.
Yeah.
No, I dropped 35 pounds or something like that when I stopped drinking, and I was not fucking healthy at the end of that, dude. Like, I mean, it wasn't healthy throughout most of that, but when I fucking like looked down one day and fucking like could see bones sticking out and fucking
So
You've
we
seen
had
me,
an
Steve.
update
I dropped 45 fucking pounds in 2 weeks one time. Like yeah, that shit's like alarming.
because you're Christian Bale and you were offered a movie role.
No,
We have an
it's a blood clot
internal-
related thing, but
Yeah.
when you lose that much fucking weight, man, that shit's like something's up. Period. Like that's not like that doesn't happen to fucking normal people. Like just I just lost fucking a quarter of my fucking body weight. Like they're trying to push that shit aside. Like it's ridiculous.
So Mo said 3 minutes ago that his screen had frozen and the court was seemingly empty. So he missed the first 15 minutes of from lunch, thinking that the court was restarting late. So more technical issues for reporters is always bullshit.
Shocking.
So over on Assange defense, yeah, and I can't I'm gonna go back to about 10 minutes. It might be stuff. It's stuff that we've already heard, but I can't stress the importance enough of just everyone who's in the chat right now. Like, if you're active on social media, tear apart this report by Kronberg that that the prosecution keeps relying on in the
And
witness.
I'll put that directly in chat for everybody right now too.
So 10 minutes ago on Assange defense, Fitzgerald, there's no evidence that Blackwood referred to anything other than Gordon Kronberg's statement. Blackwood did not comment on or consider the prospect that Assange would be sent to ADX Florence in Colorado. When you say there is no solitary confinement at ADC in Alexandria, are you repeating verbatim what Kronberg said? That's the question to Blackwood. Blackwood says yes. This paragraph was about Kronberg's submission. Blackwood said suicide risk is based on a multitude of factors. I understand there is a variety of treatments under special administrative measures. Fitzgerald reading from a prison warden stating that there is one standard regime under SAMS applied to all under it. Blackwood agrees that in solitary with no outside communication, phone calls, that regime would be deleterious to his mental state. Fitzgerald says, and that is not like what he has had in UK prison. Blackwood said, yes, he relies on use of phone for communication to the outside, so it's not equivalent to his UK conditions. Blackwood says, again, that is the most pessimistic end of the spectrum. So now, when forced to admit that he is largely full of bullshit and lies, and the report that he is relying on for his bullshit and lies is also made out of bullshit and lies, now he's got to resort to this, well, that's how you would look at it if you were a pessimist. But of course, Blackwood is, an optimist who is arguing on behalf of the countries that want to kidnap Julian Assange and torture him for 175 years. Optimism.
Empathy, baby.
Right? Where else you gonna get it? The fuck?
Cartoon. Is Andrew froze or something? Oh no, there he goes.
No, I'm here. I was looking to see where the updates were coming at right now.
I'm just paranoid because your internet. I need signs of life.
No, I'm paranoid with my internet too. I'm really good at sitting still and staring at things. It's
We
strange.
got a nice little exchange, couple of exchanges here on Consortium News. 8 minutes ago, Fitzgerald, do you accept that given the condition of Mr. Assange, you would be negatively affected if subjected to inhumane conditions of detention, i.e. SAMS is described by Maureen Baird as a basic regime? Blackwood says yes, or I think in solitary with no contact with a support group and therapy, yes. Fitzgerald, do you now accept that Assange was taken to the medical wing because of his deteriorating condition? Blackwood, that seems to be the case from the Belmarsh staff report.
So you actually missed this part of it earlier, where Blackwood said that the UK prisons forced the medical isolation on Julian Assange. Don't know the legal standing of it, but simply because of that video that came out back in 2019, if you can remember back that far during all this. And that I thought that was particularly disturbing, so I'm glad that that position has changed, but I think that that should still kind of further be investigated, because if it is true, and I'm not saying that it is, the UK shouldn't be able to just medically quarantine someone based on embarrassment. Like, that doesn't make sense. But we do have Mary Kostakidis here coming out.
Wait, hold up. Let me conclude the tweet, the exchange here on Consortium News, because it's just so emblematic of everything that has happened during this entire medical portion of the hearing. So yeah, that seems to be the case from the Belmarsh staff report. Fitzgerald, would you agree that Dr. Corson is the person Assange has opened up to? Blackwood, yes. Fitzgerald, did you speak with her? Blackwood, no.
Really?
Yeah.
Stick to the script. Stick to the script.
So we have Mary Kostakidis as of a couple minutes ago saying the witness agrees that Julian Assange told him he felt better after being moved out of medical care. We'll call it medical isolation because that would probably be the more appropriate term, indicating that he doesn't cope with isolation well. And again, this was shortly after Julian got admitted to Belmarsh prison that they put him into medical segregation. I think that's actually the term that they use over there.
I mean, you got to remember too. He just spent what, fucking 10 years, damn near, in isolation. Like he was already fucking isolated. Like, duh.
Right.
These people are fucking monsters, man.
And I mean, they're shamelessly putting it on display here. That's the worst part of this whole thing, is they're
It's
not
gross.
even hiding it.
It's gross. Like, this medical testimony has been like one of the roughest things I've had to fucking listen to in my life. It's fucking disgusting.
It is. It's brutal. It's brutal the way that the U.S. tries to, or the U.S. prosecution even tries, like yesterday with the autism arguments. I'm going back to literally like 18th century thought on what autism is and what you're capable of as a human.
It's nuts. Like that shit shouldn't even be like part of evidence. You know what I mean? Like it's so outdated and gross. It's ridiculous.
Well, it's doubly shitty for any of us that have to report on it, and I don't think that it's just me that thinks this. Like, I've talked to a couple other people who are covering the case, but it feels like a fucking just total violation on our part to discuss and analyze what took place in the court this week. Or at least it certainly does to me. Like, it feels like I'm fucking just entirely violating the privacy and life of this man who has a fucking, a government transparency website so that private citizens can keep their private data to themselves and their private thoughts to themselves. Like,
I mean, I think this is part of their goal is, like, even if he gets free, like, this shit is gonna linger over his head. You know what I mean? Like, does that make sense? Like that, like it's like they're trying to discredit him. Even if they don't win this case, they're still gonna fucking discredit him mentally. Like, that's fucked. Like, it's just gross, man.
So I want to pick up with Defense Assange from about 13 minutes ago. Blackwood agrees that in solitary, with no outside communication or phone calls, the regime would be deleterious to his mental state. I don't remember that word.
Deleterious.
Deleterious, of course. And that it's not like And is that not like what he has in UK prisons? Blackwood says yes. He relies on the use of phone calls to communicate with the outside. So this wouldn't be equivalent to his UK conditions. Blackwood says again, most pessimistic. Again, that is the most pessimistic end of the spectrum. I don't know if you can hear that. I don't know what the hell's going on. I think they're cutting trees down.
Of course they are.
Lordy, Lord. And I believe this is Fitzgerald asking again. Isolation doesn't agree with Julian. Blackwood says relative isolation, yes, referring to Julian's time in the medical ward in Belmarsh. Aware that Chelsea Manning had attempted suicide in the Truesdale Adult Detention Center.
Jesus.
Wood
Yeah.
chipper?
I'm telling you.
Dude, like every fucking day, how much like yard work does this fucking neighborhood do? Like, this is weird.
There's a guy on the street across from me, like behind this set of houses, that's using a chainsaw. That's a shipping truck that's driving past, and then there's a wood chipper half a block down that way.
All fucking feds, probably. Jesus.
Contractors get a contract. If the plumbers knowing that the plumbers in Daniel Ellsberg's case were the ones that were doing contract work for the intelligence communities way back then, I think having a wood chipper wouldn't be too far out of the question for them.
Right?
But it's quieted down, so I'm going to try to finish this last tweet here.
I'll be right back.
Are you aware that Chelsea Manning attempted suicide in the Truesdale Adult Detention Center? Blackwood says yes. When giving this glowing review of the Truesdale, didn't you think that was relevant? Blackwood says, I referred to the fact that Julian mentioned it to me. So that gets us caught up with Defense Assange. And again, guys, I'm sorry this is a super heavy topic to get through. But yeah, it's just where we're at with the court proceedings, unfortunately. Mary Kostakidis has one out from 5 minutes and one out from 3 minutes. 5 minutes ago, Fitzgerald going through the notes where there are constant references to asking for the Sumerians on the phone. Blackwood says yes, but also during that period he was reported to do better. Fitzgerald asks whether this might be exactly because of access to the Samaritans, for example. And then I believe this is Mary saying this. I have to say that Dr. Blackwood is giving it a go. I have to say Dr. Blackwood is being given a going over and showing signs of stress. So that's good at least. I wish we had access to the cloud video platform, but Mary Kostakidis does do a good job of setting and explaining the scene as well as talking about the case itself and the cross-examining. So I really appreciate her filling us in with those little gaps, because it is something that we are terribly missing out on, not being able to see this cloud video platform. Fitzgerald asks about Chelsea and Epstein, and asks if he would say that Epstein could have resisted the impulse but didn't. Blackwood keeps referring to the predictions that Julian Assange would not be able to participate in his legal process have not come to pass. I would like to remind everybody that Julian Assange did not get to meet with his attorneys for 6 months. I believe it was 4 or 5 cases in a row where he was reported as unwell. So that in and of itself, allowing Blackwood to even say that is a bit audacious. And again, I'll repeat that line. Blackwood keeps referring to the prediction that Julian Assange would not be able to participate in this legal process have not come to pass. So after not being able to meet for 6 months with his attorneys while he was in Belmarsh prison, since then, we know that he has only been given a half an hour before court starts. I was reviewing it actually, and on the second day, it came out that Julian is getting no time after trial to be able to meet with his prosecution afterwards. which is why that daily
Not
motion.
not prosecution. His
Or,
lawyers.
yeah, with his defense. I'm sorry. My brain's hurting. But yeah, he didn't get to meet with his lawyers for 6 months before actually coming into this extradition case. So
I mean,
that is an extremely unfounded statement.
the way I see it is they're just trying to fucking set it up so they can go to so the defense can appeal. I mean, that's it. I'm sure that the fucking verdict is already in.
Oh yeah, I bet Vanessa
it's
Bracer
yeah.
files on the desk already has all these fucking pre-prepared statements.
I mean, she pre-prepared everything else. Why wouldn't she pre-prepare the fucking verdict? You're muted.
And
Steve.
this is no, I'm not. Am I?
Steve.
I'm muted. This is something that we were talking about when we first got to DC, and it was our good friend Beth, I think, who raised it the first time. It was like, well, the defense is using this time during the actual extradition hearing as a way to lay the foundations for their appeals. And not that means that they're like phoning it in or going through the motions, but what they're doing is honing in on key pieces of argument so that when it comes to the appeals process in a higher court with a different judge, they can present to them the multitude of factual inaccuracies that have taken place on part of not just the prison staff or the respective governments that conspired to destroy Julian Assange, but also the methods by which they achieved that, and the just mountain of fucking
I'll be back in just a
smears
second.
and lies, God, that that they used in order to detain him, to keep him detained, and to sway public opinion against him. So it's I mean, it's one of those things where like it sucks to realize that this whole entire process, and for how just invasive and gut-wrenching the thing has been for everyone, you know, with a pulse and also a heart that has watched it. It's disgusting to think of it as a warm-up. That's essentially what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm viewing it.
And it sucks, man, because again, I don't want to know any of this shit.
Yeah, I don't either. Like, that should be private shit. It's medical shit.
Let's go. When was the last time that Andre read off anything from Mary Kostakidis?
Very recently. I don't know what minute he was on though. I have to walk away for like a minute. My teeth are floating.
Go for it. If Andre already read this, I'm sorry, but 11 minutes ago, Mary Kostakidis Fitzgerald going through the notes where there are constant references to asking for Samaritans on the phone. We went through this, I believe, yesterday. Samaritans are the suicide prevention helpline in the UK. Blackwood says yes, but also during that period, he was reported to be better. Fitzgerald asks whether this might be exactly because of access to the Samaritans, for example. At this point, Mary makes an editor's note saying, have to say, Dr. Blackwood being given a going over and showing signs of stress. Fitzgerald asking about Chelsea and Epstein, asks if he would say Epstein could have resisted the impulse but didn't. Blackwood keeps referring to predictions that Julian would not be able to participate in this legal process have not come to pass. Fitzgerald quotes Deely and contrasts, that's Dr. Deely, the person who testified at the beginning of the week, and contrasts with Blackwood's descriptions based on another prison healthcare worker's notes that include comments like that he has had successful relationships with numerous women. So I guess it's Fitzgerald's turn to discredit witnesses just by asking them to assert or defend their positions rather than by opening with, I don't think that you're credible enough to be here, which is the track that, what's his name? Lewis, Captain Coke knows. That he uses.
Is that his new name?
I think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be Mr. Mega Brain himself.
Mega Brain.
Mega Brain. Fuck. It really does sound like a bad fucking Disney villain.
Right? That's what I said, man.
there's-
Like it's so true.
There's like somewhere there's a vault of all of the sideshow, like, you know, major and minor villains that never got put into movies.
Mega Brain's got to be one of them.
Mega Brain's one of them. They did have one that was Mega Mind. I can't remember what. fucking
Oh,
movie
that's
that-
right. That was blah blah blah. It's one of the.
like, The Incredibles or something.
No.
maybe?
I think that was the one with the guy that sounded Russian. Steve Carell did it.
Okay.
I don't fucking remember.
They put Steve Carell in everything, so that doesn't really.
No, that's what made him like kind of like more famous again. God,
Okay.
I don't remember. Gru was the guy's name in that one, but I think that's the one with Megamind.
Okay. Maybe somebody in the chat knows. I don't know.
But
Repeat that, Andre. You just
You're
cut
gonna
out.
have to repeat that. You
sorry,
froze.
we're back on a short recess after Blackwood's testimony ended, as Dr. Sandra Crosby is getting ready to come in after the break. And I'm not sure if this is a defense witness or a prosecution witness. And I'm sure we'll get some clarity once she takes the stand with some tweets. But just put that out there. I'm not currently aware if she is for the defense or for the prosecution. So we have Mary Kostakidis with 2 more tweets as of 6 and 2 minutes ago.
Despicable Me, maybe.
What?
I think it is Despicable Me.
Okay. That sounds right.
But Fitzgerald quotes Dealey and constraints with Blackwood's description based on another prison healthcare worker's notes that include comments like he has had a successful relationship with numerous women.
Is there a weed eater now?
What?
Is that a weed eater?
That's the other wood chipper. With the
Jesus.
same thing going on the other side.
There's
That's
two?
Across a block that way.
Dude, this can't be an accident. I'm telling you.
Welcome to my world. So Blackwood says that he is concerned Julian Assange has never been diagnosed with Asperger's despite previously being in psychiatric care. Fitzgerald asks for his notes of his consultations with Julian and Daley. It's a short break while they consult Julian Assange.
Well, it's awful nice that, you know, once or twice a week throughout 8 hours a day of testimony, they consult the defendant.
Yep. So Juan Passarelli, I don't want to read through all the other stuff again. I'm just going to go to his latest one from 2 minutes ago. He says, 5-minute break. The camera pans to Julian, who seems to be instructing Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald has to put his ear to the glass in order to hear Assange. Julian is wearing a mask and is well groomed with a smart suit, white shirt, and a tie. So just to run through it here so everyone knows what happens leading up to Julian actually arriving in court. I don't know about today because the timetable was a little bit different for starting off. There was a 2-hour delay in the court proceedings this morning. But every other morning, not sure about today's time, but Julian is woken up at 5 o'clock in the morning. He is strip searched. He is x-rayed. He is handcuffed. He is placed in what has been described as a vertical coffin inside of a transport vehicle to then be driven an hour and a half from Belmarsh Prison to the Old Bailey, to be removed from the vertical coffin inside of the transport vehicle, to be placed inside of a glass box where he's now wearing a mask. That's terrible. Fitzgerald, his lawyer, literally has to put his ear to the glass to hear Assange talk.
There's a little follow-up from Assange's defense that says actually there may be one more question for Blackwood after recess. He's still on the stand, and Fitzgerald just took instruction from Julian.
Oh, hey.
Okay.
So they might not be done with that witness yet.
We will see. I wonder if Blackwood is there in person or via video link.
Sounds
One
like
more
he's in
time?
sounds like he's in
Do we know-
person.
Yeah, do we know if Blackwood's there in person or is he there via video link?
I think he's there in person.
I mean, his name's what, Nigel? So I'm assuming he's from around there.
He's local. Based on the Nigility of his name.
And again, guys, this is some fucking dark shit that we're going through here. So I apologize for anybody that's just tuning in and not understanding. But for these last couple days, Tuesday, Wednesday, today, and potentially tomorrow, they're going through medical cross-examination. Yesterday, while we were going through it, QC Lewis, who is the lead prosecutor for the United States Defense, called a witness retarded. They were talking about
what? I thought no, he called him autistic.
Well,
That's
So,
you got
I
to
was
differentiate that.
exaggerating.
That's different.
Not to clarify, but they were going through the symptoms of Asperger's and autism, particularly noting about eye contact, where the U.S. prosecutor Lewis had the audacity to ask a witness, "Does your avoidance of eye contact with me indicate that you have symptoms of this?" To which case the witness definitely said, "I've never been tested, but I'm reading the body language of the judge, the defense, and the prosecution." So there was that.
Yeah, that
I
was
was using
that was wild, man. Like I don't think I've ever seen any court anywhere like accuse a witness of like having a some kind
Right.
of
I was
health
using
problem. It's weird.
the old medical term that the 1800s, when apparently Lewis went to medical school, would have been using at the time, just for the knowledge that he seemed to have had. So he's probably reading some Victorian era books over there in the UK about
no,
Asperger's and autism.
Asperger's wasn't discovered when the Victorian era.
Yeah, that's a newer
medical
one.
texts were being written. I don't even know if they had a word for autism in the Victorian era. So I'm surprised that Fitzgerald was able to learn a couple of new words. Not Fitzgerald, Lewis was able to learn a couple of new words before the hearing took place, based on his extensive knowledge of late 1800s medical research
And his mega brain.
And his mega brain.
Mega brain.
Can you pull that picture up just so we can give people some reference to that?
Yeah, dude, I'll go hunt for it.
You should bookmark that shit. It should.
I should. You're right.
I need to go save it.
So one of our
It needs to be memed.
Shout out to Ryan Christian, the last American vagabond, for consistently retweeting the fact that we are live and covering this hearing.
Much love,
Ryan is going through a ton of unnecessary and overreaching censorship in his own right. And so big shout out to him for thinking about us, even though he's going through a fucking just shit show from YouTube. And
I've been out of the loop for a couple weeks since you guys have been in DC. More shit happened?
Yeah.
Oh damn! I'll have to.
Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and save this. I'm gonna go ahead and save this picture, but I'll put it up in a second. Okay.
I'm gonna meme the fuck out of that picture.
So, in case you haven't been with us for the last couple of days, our friend Nikki over in France, who, by the way, is having problems commenting on the thread. She's been shut out and keeps getting like error messages or you don't have permission to comment here. So if anyone has any advice on how to fix that, please let me know so I can pass it along to her. But she sent this Monday while we were making fun of James Lewis QC, who apparently
And he's
calls
charming.
himself
He's also
a
charming.
charming man with a mega brain. I'm trying to figure out the exact look on his face in this picture, and I can't. Like, I'm sort of battling between I'd like to wear your face like a mask and
Fuck them kids.
right, which suite are John Podesta and Joe Biden in again? Because I need to get up there.
Where's my adrenochrome? Something.
Right. Pass me the adrenochrome and two
I-
small children.
I think he strikes me as quite charming.
Now,
Right?
that's my
Like
kind of pizza party.
charming. I mean,
Charming is not the word I would go. go with.
just yeah, charming. This guy's a fucking monster.
It is,
Charming.
sociopaths are a very weird type of human. I think that's really the
Rob Juno, it's the face of you can't see my fingers in my bum. Thank
Right
you
on,
for that,
Rob.
Thank you for that. That's fucking great.
we need a little bit of humor having to cover this shit. Like just a reminder of that, because this is some dark shit, man. Like this is hard to cover.
Yeah, look, and if anybody's wondering why we're spending so much time like laughing or cracking jokes, it's because if we weren't, this whole stream would basically just be me screaming into the microphone for 5 hours.
It's a coping mechanism.
Not with words, just for like fucking 5 straight hours. There's only 2 ways that I'm ever going to process things, and the first is to crack jokes, and the other is to crack faces or bones or
So we have Juan Passarelli picking up. We are back in court. Fitzgerald says you have notes. You have your notes OS interviews with Assange. Maybe the notes from Mr. Davies. You will provide us with any notes. You will provide us with any notes, will you? And Blackwood says yes, happy to share. And then we get one tweet 4 minutes ago that says Lewis is back. Oh my. Lewis has a couple quick questions and Blackwood is dismissed. So
is there another short recess while they bring out the next witness?
that's what I'm looking for here. You have Mary Kostakidis. A final question from Fitzgerald. You said you have got notes from both interviews, and there may be notes of interviews with Miss Daly. Anyone else? No one else. Lewis points out Maureen Baird was talking about another prison. Fitzgerald points out she says the special administrative measures conditions are the exact same. Lewis said, did you understand how it related to the ADC prison? I'm assuming they're meaning ADX Florence.
No, ADC is Alexandria Detention Center.
Okay, I wasn't sure. There's a lot of ADs in here.
Yeah.
Blackwood says, yes, he did, and saying that he was that he understands how special administrative measures relates to the Alexandria Detention Center. Lewis says, you say you've given his mental health condition. You say given his mental health condition, it would not be unjust. I'm assuming to extradite or to put in SAMS. Blackwood says yes. Lewis asks about another prison doctor who Blackwood did not speak to, asking about her status, and she is at the beginning of her career. The witness is finished. So that finishes up the testimony there from Nigel Blackwood. And again, earlier in court,
You're cutting out. You cut out a second.
So earlier today in court, you literally had the prosecution's witness say that Fitzgerald was giving a pessimistic view of what could happen to Mr. Assange if he is sent to the UK court system.
U.S. court system.
Special administrative measures is the same no matter what prison you're sent to. It doesn't matter. As they refer to it, the regime of special administrative measures does not change. It is just the facility that changes while you're placed in it. So ADX Florence, MCC, and the Alexandria Detention Center would all have the same special administrative measures. It's not varying from place to place. That is a federal thing that gets placed on them that we know would most likely get placed on Julian when he's sent over here, if not definitely placed on him.
Somebody on Twitter just pointed something out to me that Julian has a chronic lung condition. Like, this is something we all know and we have all accepted. According to the government's own COVID-19 guidelines on mask wearing, Julian should not be wearing a mask in that room. Fucking. So it seems like in an effort to make it look like they're complying, since they just had to since they used social distancing as a reason to clear the courtroom yesterday from having more supporters in it, that they're violating the NHS's own health guidelines in order to drive home the point that they're going to use social distancing and COVID protocols as a means of enforcement.
I mean, who did they kick out? They kicked out Stella and Christian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that cartoon, Steve. Cartoon.
Agreed.
I just had like a whole flock of birds roll up.
Man, like you're in like a tainted spot or something.
But yeah, it's DC. Everything here is tainted. You can feel it.
It's true.
You really can. Like, you get inside of the Beltway, and you become aware of like the concentrated evil that is contained there. And just about everywhere you look, you see that fucking satanic obelisk, the fucking Washington Monument. Like, you can't fucking escape it.
I don't think I'm in any rush to get to DC.
No, I wouldn't be. But while we have a little lull here, while Crosby's taking the stand, the next witness. Yesterday we were supposed to be going to the White House Visitor Center. Everything got okayed by the Metro PD. We get to the White House Visitor Center and some lady runs out. And she's like, I'm the person in charge of the permits for the national parks, and this is national park territory, after we were told by the Metro PD that it was not, that it was perfectly okay for us to be there, and that and then they told us that, no, we can't be there. So we moved across the street to Freedom Plaza. Under her direction, she said, you guys can move over there. I just can't have you here. We set up, we were there for an hour. We talked with, I don't know, maybe 24 people or so as they were going past, getting honks, waves, the usual. And then 2 park policemen roll up and say, you guys can't be here. You have to take this down. You can't have a setup. And then we tell them, like, hey, like, those people right across the street said that it was okay. Like, the lady said that we could come over here and do this. We just couldn't do it over there. And to which they informed us that that lady lied to us, apparently, that we shouldn't have been doing it anywhere. And that best case scenario, we could try across the street and hope we don't get chased out by local non-police security guards on a public sidewalk. So instead of doing a 4-hour event, we cut it down to the...
You just cut out.
Cut it down
You cut out it, like, instead of doing a 4-hour event,
Instead of doing a 4-hour event, we did a 2-hour event. And then headed back to the house just because we didn't feel like getting chased around by police, even though everything was supposed to have been approved. Today we are going outside of the old museum building, which was once the home of the Free Press Museum, the museum here in Washington.
This is my favorite little bit of irony about the whole DC thing, by the way.
Yeah. And it was, so the museum was purchased by Johns Hopkins University. And I don't know who it was sold to, if it was at the discretion of Johns Hopkins, but it is now the museum residence, where they keep a little bit of the museum in the front with the Berlin Wall and the fancy billboard in the front, like a big old wooden plaque with the First Amendment written all over it. But it's luxury apartments now. It's right next to the Capitol. It's literally like right there, like you have Capitol Hill and then the museum right around the corner with the White House tucked a little bit further away. So we're going to go out there. We have submitted our permits. We did send in the notification, so we should be good to go with all of that, as long as the Metro PD doesn't decide, or some other of the 19,000 different law enforcement agencies doesn't decide to try to chase us away. One of the things, though, if there is anyone with some technical capabilities and the drive to do it, for activists across the board, there does need to be some kind of interactive map or something that allows you to see what police departments are in what jurisdictions, because you may file a permit with the Metro Police Department or the whatever other one, but there are situations where you have 3 different law enforcement agencies all responsible for one area, and you have to file permits in an escalating fashion with them, which I always thought was quite bizarre. So if there's anyone that has the ability to put a map together for DC of what law enforcements govern what places, that would be awesome, because there are places that literally have 4 different law enforcement agencies responsible for that city block, and then you walk across the street and it's just one, and then you turn left and it's 3, and it's just crazy. So there's really no set clear standard for how any of it works.
Like we
found out-
Go chase down some ibuprofen.
I need some too, but we don't have any here. We
I
found out
lost like 3 bottles
you-
during the week that I was there.
Well, I'm gonna have to find them.
They gotta fucking be there.
I'll have to look, because I have a brain ache. So we have Kato Lee over in the A4A Restream chat that says they should kick this case out. I agree. I agree wholly with that assessment, my friend. So let's see. So we have Kevin Gostola actually putting a tweet out 18 minutes ago. We already read that one, I think, maybe. But we'll pick it up here. Twice during his testimony, Blackwood said that they'd have to be careful about the predictions that were made that do not come true. He said the prediction that Assange wouldn't be able to engage with the proceedings. Fitzgerald said that he may challenge the judge or court on this particular issue. Like we'd said, Julian didn't get to meet with his lawyers for 6 months leading up to this. I'm not going to read through all of Kevin's.
Nor was he allowed access to view any of the materials that the defense had prepared on his behalf, nor was he allowed to take part in the preparation of his own defense. When they finally gave him access to a computer, they glued the fucking keys down. Yeah, this has just been fucking shit show from start to finish. According to Mary Kostakidis 5 minutes ago, the next witness, Dr. Sandra Crosby, is on video but isn't able to hear the court.
Are you fucking kidding me?
That's
And
what it says.
watch the concierge is gonna fucking blame the defense.
Oh, sure. Sure. Why wouldn't they?
Asshats.
So Crosby is apparently one of the doctors who started visiting Julian Assange while he was still in the embassy. There's a piece out by The Intercept right now that just came out that kind of details who she is, and also gives a pretty thorough background on the psychological and physical harm that Julian Assange was exposed to and suffered while in the Ecuadorian embassy. Recall that well over 5 years ago, the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention made a determination that Julian Assange was being arbitrarily detained in the Ecuadorian embassy. So this is a ongoing thing here, and hopefully they can sort out their fucking video mess, because I have a feeling that this witness will be able to I don't know, clear some shit up.
Yeah, as of a minute ago, she was able to properly connect, and Mary Costaquitas says here, Fitzgerald said, "You saw Julian Assange on a number of occasions starting in October 2017. Crosby says, I was visited to do this by an American doctor due to the effects of Julian Assange's confinement in the Ecuadorian embassy, and I visited him twice in Belmarsh prison." So this is someone that can speak on Julian's condition before. It may be because Fitzgerald is getting to ask questions first. I'm not sure if this is a defense or prosecution witness.
It's
I'm
a
assuming
defense witness. She's visited Julian in the embassy a couple of times. She was there at the behest of a U.S. doctor who wanted a team to come and evaluate the long-term conditions of living in the embassy under what amounts to arbitrary detention. So she was part of a medical team that came to see how living like that affects somebody. Wrote some pretty declarative things about it as late as January of this year. And of course, just based on the fact that she saw him once in 2019 and once in 2020, as soon as the UC Global story broke, she also wrote what amounts to a righteous tirade about how doctor-patient confidentiality was violated. And we may, in fact, for I believe the first time, hear about UC Global during her questioning. I would like to think that would happen.
Yeah, I really hope it's. I'm glad you brought that up. Hopefully, it's one of those moments.
Yeah. We gotta have at least 2 of those a week.
Yeah. Cartoon.
Let's see if Mo's got anything on this yet. Nope.
We have 1 minute ago by Juan Passarelli. Crosby said, when I saw him, he described to me his symptoms of depression and PTSD. He also complained about the physical symptoms that I have no resources to evaluate him in. So she's speaking specifically about his mental state and not about the physical conditions that he said he was having. So I think that we'll just make sure we make that distinction here. I'm sure Lewis will try to use something along those lines in the second half of this to push back against her. Oh, this is just so gross, man.
He's charming. He's gonna charm her.
Well, it's not his turn yet.
It's not his turn.
We'll be in what, 20 minutes? That's all they get. 30 minutes.
Right.
Shit.
Yeah, they get 30 minutes unless they ask for more time. So it goes 30 minutes for the counter team. So like if it's a defense witness, the defense gets 30 minutes first. The prosecution gets an hour, and then the defense gets another 30 minutes. In some cases, and with some witnesses, particularly Eric Lewis, I believe, and Shankman, the prosecution got 4 hours to question, while the defense had 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after.
How is that like equitable justice type of deal?
I know this is, I don't know what other case you can point to show a better use of the open justice system that the UK has like this,
I always hear like UK people like, oh, our justice system is better. I'm not seeing it.
Well, I mean, what other justice system in the world would throw out 40 non-governmental organizations that are court observers and politicians? Like that's obviously open justice right there when you can just at the whim of a judge on the first day of the largest court hearing in human history for the trial of free speech, just throw out non-governmental observers. We had Rebecca Vincent actually come on with us I think it was the Saturday before everything kicked off, and she described what the situation was as essentially worse than Turkey.
Yeah.
Which
In
is
terms of let's be clear here.
Yeah.
In terms of access to the hearings, in terms of Reporters Without Borders' ability to be present and cover what was going on, she said the UK had limited their I don't know if rights is the correct word, but eliminated their ability to participate in the process at a rate that made Turkey look good. Turkey, if you're not, and this is something that we need to have Partisan Girl back on for, is so that she can explain better the adversarial relationship between Turkey and the northern part of Syria, as well as Turkey's relationship with the U.S. military and our own, I guess, aims and objectives in the region. If you remember, Turkey has a like quasi dictator in their president Erdogan. And for that guy's courtrooms to be more accessible to Reporters Without Borders than the United Kingdom's, it is pretty fucking hectic, if you ask me.
It's a nice way to put
Cat
it.
Terrell, real quick in my chat, Cat Terrell is wondering about Commander X. Commander X poked his head back up last week on Twitter, so he is around. I spoke to him very, very briefly. He would prefer to have everybody forget that Commander X was ever around. That's what he would prefer. He wants to be a hermit. So I'm going to respect that.
absolutely. So we have Juan Passarelli with a couple more tweets here in the last 3 minutes. In Belmarsh prison, he described depression and suicidal thoughts, and being watched a documentary series that is grammatically strange, but I don't even want to finish that one. In my further visits, his depression's worsened. Oh, the wood chipper's right in front of me now. In my further visit, his depression was worsened in December 2019. Assange told me that he was not revealing the full extent of his depression because he feared that it would put him under a worse condition. And that's, I'm assuming, referring to not wanting to be placed under suicide watch while in coronavirus lockdown, while inside of Belmarsh prison. But I'm not entirely sure. I'm just assuming that context there, because it had stated previously that Julian was very reluctant to talk about
when you go, like, if they think you're more of a risk, they're going to put you in more isolation. So I think that's probably what what he's referring to.
Yeah.
Because, like, yeah, if they're like, oh, you're more depressed, well, we're just going to stick you in a deeper, darker fucking hole. That's what they do in prison.
Yeah, the way that they deal with mental health patients in prison is normally to just stick them in a smaller cell with complete isolation. Because, helpful.
Mary Kostakidis here, 3 tweets in the last 6 minutes. Fitzgerald says the conditions of confinement and the consequences, how his physical health has been affected by prolonged psychological torture. Crosby describes the symptoms of depression and PTSD that she observed over time his mental state was declining, and stated that they were discussing suicide, and described a Bosnian, charged with war crimes who swallowed cyanide pills in court. He was suffering with an affliction that he could not have been treated outside of the embassy. He increasingly became very depressed and agitated, feeling the full context.
You cut out right before agitated.
Okay. I'll just start from the top with this one. He was suffering from an affliction that he could not have had treated outside of the Ecuadorian embassy. And he increasingly became depressed and agitated. He told me that he was not revealing the full extent of his ideations, that he did not reveal the full extent of his ideations, that he would be put into isolation, she said.
So there's a little bit more follow-up to that on Consortium News. Let's see. Crosby says, I was concerned about Julian's mental health condition and long-term toothache. His condition deteriorated over subsequent visits. He looked substantially different. He couldn't think straight, couldn't remember names, appeared severely depressed, talked about suicide, pleaded for help.
And again, I just want to say to the audience that this is some heavy shit. Yeah. Yeah. Juan Pastorelli here says, Dr. Crosby deals with depression and PTSD on a daily basis. And I don't know if that's in reference to patients or to herself, but well, no, I don't out there without that. Here we go. Mary Costaquitas says, she said he was extremely depressed and access to the Sumerians had helped him, that she deals with depression and PTSD in her clinical practice. Lewis objects. Fitzgerald says, did you form a view of his condition? Crosby said in 2019, severely depressed, met the DMS-5 major criteria.
I would like to give a special thank you to the Assange Defense account for retweeting the interview that I gave Danny Sherson and Fortress on a Hill about Julian's case. I gave the interview a couple of weeks ago. They released it late last night, and I haven't even been able to tweet it out yet. So thank you to the Defend Assange account or Assange Defense account, however you want to read it, for helping to circulate that interview.
Yeah, it's out now.
Yeah. Henry emailed me like right before I tried to go to sleep for the first time last night, and I was like, okay. And then, that's as far as I got with it. I ended up not getting it.
So, real quick, we have Lewis being Lewis before it's even his turn to be a Lewis.
Is he dropping a Lewis?
No, he's dropping a Lewis as an objection. The prosecution objects to a question about Assange's psychiatric and psychological state, that she is not an expert on that. Fitzgerald for the defense references her expertise in treating people with psychiatric trauma. So apparently the mega brain can't just wait his turn to be a facetious shitlord. And that in the
facetious shitlord, that's a great term.
In the middle of the defense's questioning now, he's raising objections about expertise, while this woman has stated that she is an expert multiple times, that she has a clinical practice that she regularly meets with people with severe depression and PTSD. Um, so as Lewis is a joke, like I don't even see how that objection can be brought up in court in that way, just straight in the middle of the defense's questioning. It just seems like a way to waste time.
Like you said, facetious shitlord.
Facetious shitlord. That was hard to say.
It is a hard one to say.
I imagine. I
Um,
do. I do.
So this is going back to Mary Costakides here. Fitzgerald, this is halfway through the tweet above the new one. Fitzgerald says, did you form a view on his medical conditions? In October 2019, he was severely depressed, met the DMS-5 or the DSM-5 major criteria, and his suicide risk was high. He said the trigger would be extradition to the U.S., where his life would be intolerable. She adds that she believes he would be at high risk of suicide if extradited. She is concerned about the physical condition, the chest pain, the dizziness, the shortness, I'm going to say, of breath. Mo has 2 tweets out here in the last minute. And I think they're doing the wood chipper again. I'm sorry, guys. I think Mr. Assange is at a high risk of completing a suicide if he were to be extradited, says Sonia Crosby, who met with Mr. Assange repeatedly whilst he was in the Ecuadorian embassy and later when he was at Belmarsh prison. Dr. Crosby says when she saw him in October 2019, he met all the criteria for major depression and was profoundly impacted his functioning, and that he had thoughts of suicide many times from the day, and she felt that he met all the DSM-5 criteria for major depression. Can you hear that wood chipper real bad?
Of course.
It's just I don't see it picking up, so I wasn't sure.
It's not. We can still hear you, so it's all right.
Okay. So, yeah. I just again want to say thank you for everybody who's watching, but for the wonderful people behind the scenes that are connected to the Cloud Video platform and watching and transcribing it for us in real time. So thank you very much for that.
And thank you, Kevin, for coming on all these mornings.
Yes, thank you to the good Kevin for joining us this morning. That was unexpected and wonderful at the same time. So I appreciated him jumping in.
Yeah,
So I don't want to keep reading the same conversation about this over and over again as people's tweets are updating. So as new statements roll in, we can read them, but I don't want to just repeat that same line of questioning multiple times because it is pretty heavy. So actually, as of 1 minute ago, more discussions of this is from @Defense Assange. More discussions of Assange physical health. End of questioning for the defense. James Lewis to re-examine for the prosecution. So I hope everybody's ready for this fucking asshole to come through here and try to tell this woman that she doesn't know what the hell she's talking about, even though she does it for a living. So that's what we're about to see. It's what we see every time this guy takes the stage in these medical questions. It's really gross. So I thank the witnesses for being able to bear with it and stick through, because it's, I don't know, it's heavy and it's hard. It's hard to even sit here reading through most of this, just being this close to the situation as it is. I'm going to mute though, because that thing's getting louder and louder.
I really can't hang out too much longer before I gotta go to work. But let me pull up and see if we've got anything new as of so as of a couple of minutes ago, End of questioning for the defense. James Lewis cross-examining for the prosecution. Lewis opens by saying, would it be fair to say you were sympathetic to Mr. Assange's cause? Dr. Crosby says, no, it wouldn't be fair to say that at all. All right. So
he's already trying to drop a Lewis.
well handled. Lewis, when you visited Assange in the embassy, did you come to London for other reasons or only to visit Assange? Crosby, I had other business there and combined it with my visits with Assange. So who paid for your travel? I did. He's just fucking like.
Did he forget his Adderall today or something?
I get that, you know, the more horrible of a person you are, the weirder things you need to do to yourself in order to feel something. But I didn't think it took like squatting on a fucking blackthorn bush just to fucking get the words out. Who paid for your travel?
He's charming, Steve.
I mean, we've had that. There were people that were asking us that question, like the first day that we were at the Lincoln Memorial. Like every fifth person that came up to the like easy up thing that we had was like, "So who paid you to be here?" And we're like, "Our audience." You know, fucking, we crowdfunded for this thing. It worked out. We're here. I don't know what you want me to say.
They're like, Soros!
Right?
You know that's what they're thinking.
No, the closest connection that we ever had to anything Soros related passed away before we could get started. So, sorry.
What's that?
Not going to work out the way you want it to work out. But we have a kick-ass audience and you don't, I guess. I don't know. Fucking... But yeah, like seriously, all day long, who paid for you to be here? Who's paying you to be here? Fucking nobody.
Fuck, you think
like,
man,
why aren't you on the other
paid,
side of this table screaming about press freedom with us?
Man, I'm looking at homelessness right now, and they're thinking we getting paid for this shit.
Dude, have you watched this show? Have you seen our production value? There's no way in hell we get paid for this.
Right, I don't even have soundproofing to block out the wood chipper.
You could, like, you're using my comb that I left, and you still can't comb your fucking hair right.
No, I don't even know where the comb went. I think it's in my car.
There's a reason that I have a hat on. All right,
that's fair. But at Assange defense a minute ago said or tweeted out, this is Lewis talking. You say that he was confined in the Ecuadorian embassy, but he was there of his own will, wasn't he? Just continuing fucking smears. Crosby said, I think that's a very complicated issue. His psychological state was such that he feared what would happen. I would say the question is debatable. This court case is why he had political asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. Saying he was there of his own will is really short-sighted. That's the MSNBC CNN line of he could have just left whenever he wanted. He's not in there arbitrarily. When we know he was. The U.S. had a grand jury against WikiLeaks for a decade. So no, he couldn't have just left of his own free will and have been a free person. He could have walked out and immediately have been arrested. We know that that was probably the most surveilled place in the entire world, if not the most surveilled place, with the installment of cameras and all of that directly around it, with a constant police presence for years outside of it, costing the city of London millions upon millions of dollars to do so. So no, he could not have just left of his own free will to have returned to a state of being a free person. He would have been in this situation in this courtroom much sooner.
I'm going to go ahead and guess that Lewis isn't going to appreciate the fact that Crosby says that the question is debatable or open for interpretation. And seriously, like this canard that Julian absconded to the Ecuadorian embassy or was remaining inside on his own volition. That's one of the things that I wish would die in a fucking fire. Like, of everything in my immediate area that died in a fire, if the idea that Julian was somehow like stoked to be arbitrarily detained inside the Ecuadorian embassy for 7.5 years was one of the things that got thrown in there, that would be really fucking helpful, because it's bullshit.
But just to go back to Mary Kostakidis here, because she has some new tweets out giving a little bit more context in that exchange. I'm going to kick back to where we left off, where Crosby said she was concerned with his physical condition, chest pain, dizziness, shortness of breath, long-term dental infections, osteoporosis, which is unusual in young men. So I looked at his Australian records and spoke with him. It had never been treated.
You cut out at spoke with.
I looked into his Australian records and spoke with his endocrinologist in Australia, and it had never been treated, referring to his osteoporosis. He had broke his ribs bending down to tie his shoelaces. He would be at an increased risk for fractures if he was incarcerated in the United States. Lewis said, would it be fair to say that you are sympathetic to Julian's cause? Crosby says, no, that would not be fair. Lewis continues asking, what was the purpose of your trip and who paid for it? I paid for it, multiple reasons, but mainly to see him. Lewis says, all his problems have been addressed in prison. Crosby says, no, not the osteoporosis. The osteoporosis oppression, the symptoms could be heart-related. Lewis says, are you qualified under Section 12 of the Mental Health Act? Fitzgerald says, that is ridiculous. No foreigner is. And I don't think that was a cliffhanger. I think he literally just said, that's ridiculous. No foreigner is. So Fitzgerald objecting, the judge doing nothing. Crosby says, I am qualified to give expert evidence on mental health. Lewis says a number of experienced psychiatrics have given evidence who have had more recent contact with him. Are you saying you know him better? Crosby says no. Lewis says, did you visit him on your own or with his lawyers? And I am seeing. Let's check back with Richard Medhurst and see.
There's nothing new. I just checked.
Okay.
Look, I'm gonna have to bounce and take my ass to work now.
Okay. I think this is a good place to stop because Lewis is just going to be a terribly charming, mega-brained, horrible person for the rest of this. It's how he treats all these medical witnesses. But yeah, I'd like to thank you guys for joining us. You can follow us on action_4 Assange. I hope that other larger platforms start doing more live coverage of what's actually happened for him in court. But if not, that's why we're here. We should be able to continue at least partially into week 4. But yeah, thank you guys for watching.
Yep. I'll I don't know. It's possible we'll try and pick this up later today, but definitely tomorrow, and I will make sure that my happy ass is dragged out of bed at the appropriate hour. I'm sorry for being late. I love you guys. Good luck to us all.